Our first guest is psychic medium Carla Barron. Everybody, of course, that I shouldn't say genre, but people that seem to, our listeners, our dedicated listeners and followers that follow Fringe Radio all over the place and listen to us and what have you. The genre of paranormal research and ufology and so many other things is out there. But a lot of people, of course, are into psychics and their psychic abilities, just amazing people. Carla is, I guarantee you've all seen her on television. She became world-renowned throughout the globe for her real-life portrayal of a psychic crime fighter, starring in the hit TV show True TV, formerly called Court TV series called Haunting Evidence. She has been coined the term psychic profiler for years before this series was even in development, as numerous articles, feature press stories attest covering her investigations. She also was in the pilot for Psychic Detectives on Court TV. She's appeared on several episodes of biographies, Dead Famous. Her work as a psychic profiler was highlighted on ABC's Primetime in 2020 as well. She's been a big part of MTV's Fear, which was a very, very interesting show, as well as she was featured on Psychic Hollywood, The Search for Truth on E! Network, and History Channel's Mystery Quest, the series on the ghostly Isle of Alcatraz. We've got a lot of different things to talk about tonight. I want to talk to her about a lot of different things, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun and, without a doubt, learn quite a bit. So without any further delay, let's get her on the line. Carla, good evening. Welcome to AM 630 and the Fringe Radio Show.
Hey, Pat.
How are you?
I'm ready for the questions.
Pardon me?
I rarely do radio.
Yeah.
Or interviews, but for some reason I sensed that this one I had to do. I don't know why.
Okay.
Here we are.
Sounds good.
You know, I never even heard of your radio show before, but I thought I got some sort of psychic sense that I should connect with this.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy weekend. We're into our 6th year of doing this program. We've done over 650 some interviews, and wow. I like to call myself. I'm not a paranormal researcher, Carla. I'm not a ufologist. I'm none of those things. I'm a researcher's researcher. I like to bring people on the show. I don't like to do big question and answer segments. I like to just have a fun conversation, let our listeners get to know about you and your work and the different things that you have done, and we'll learn a lot along the way. And I guarantee you the 2 hours will go quicker than you can ever imagine.
Well, I'm glad to be here. So, if anybody wants to call in, let's give them that number again and do it slow for people who are still sort of sleepy over in. I have fans in the UK and Australia and New Zealand and Japan and Ireland and all over the place. And Canada, huge fan base. So can they call in as well, or just the United States? Sure.
Yeah, the local line here in Utah, of course, is 801-254-5855. That's area code 801-254-5855. If they're out of Salt Lake, it's a toll-free number, 1-888-919-2355. That's 1-888-919-2355.
Perfect. Thanks.
So, to get started, I have been following you for a long time. I've seen you on television many, many, many times. Enjoy your work. How did Carla know that she had psychic abilities? Why don't you give our listeners a little bit of the backstory? How did you get into doing everything you do?
Well, a lot of these stories, like, you know, I never knew that I could be a writer, but once I found the blog format, I started blogging, and I thought, oh, okay, this is good because I don't have to actually do like a formalized, structured. I can write like I talk. So I was fine with that. So I actually have a few blog stories on my official blog page, and you can actually find all my links on carlabarron.net and on the Contact Carla page. So all the links to the blog, the Facebook, the Twitter, the whatever. So you can see some of these little nuggets, these little gems that I put out there about how I started. and what happened, because I didn't start out wanting to be a psychic. I don't think anybody that is doing this professionally and as often as I am. I mean, I wake up every day just so happy that I do this.
Mm-hmm.
And if it were for the money, I'd be out on cruise ships all the time, traveling the world, doing whatever, instead of actually doing readings. But I actually get very energized waking up knowing that I'm going to be doing this, but I don't know who I'm going to be reading. I have no idea until I open up my emails and I see who's ordered sessions.
Mm-hmm.
I have turned down sessions, rarely, but I have turned down sessions for certain people because I can tell that they're not in it for the right reasons. But 99% of the time we're in there, and it's so exciting not to know.
Right.
So I go in, and and that's how I begin the days I work. And as far as how I began, I was told I was going to do this. An old Italian woman who was in the Poconos area, and that's nearby where I grew up. I went there with my grandmother, and apparently my mother didn't think I was ready for this until I was around like 11 years old. So
Mm-hmm.
I got very angry at her, and I said, "What?" I said, "Why did you not tell me about this woman, Mary?" I said, "What?" So she finally said, "Oh, well, why don't you take her to go see Mary?" I mean, it was better than Disneyland, better than anything I could have ever thought could happen to me. And I couldn't stop talking about it. And I was so excited. I was like jumping around, and they couldn't calm me down. And finally we get to go see Mary. But then my mother gives this disclaimer. She said, "Oh, well, don't be scared because Mary has a cataract over her eye, and it's, she's sort of hunched over. She has, a back problem and this and that." And she's like scaring me to meet this woman before I even get there, right?
Right.
She said, "Oh, she lives on top of the hill, whatever." So I get in there. It's got the white picket fence. She answers the door. There's nothing wrong with her. She has a little bit of cataract on her eye. No big deal. So my mother was overreacting. And I went in there. I was so excited to see someone who actually did this, right?
Right.
I go in. She's very Catholic. And I was raised Catholic, so I notice all the relics on the walls. She has all the statues of Jesus, Mary, Joseph. She has actual holy water in the house,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
Like
Yeah.
you can bless yourself on the way in. She does all her readings at the kitchen table, right? And it's got the red and white checkerboard, tablecloth, the plastic kind. And she's of course got sauce cooking on the stove. And people from the tri-state area, they hear about her through word of mouth. So
Sure.
there are cars lined up around, apparently 10 blocks. Like you have to sit for 3 hours before you get to see her.
Right.
So, okay, so my grandmother and I are going over our questions. What are we going to ask? So, I mean, I've been where everybody else has been. I've been nervous before I go see a psychic, and this and that. So I started off that way, but I was so excited to just learn the process. So I watched her, and she read regular playing cards on this plastic tablecloth. And I thought, okay. So for some reason, I picked it up so easily. It was like a language to me, like some archaic language that had been long forgotten. Like I was watching her lay down these cards. There was no particular rhyme or reason to how she was doing it, but for some reason, I knew what she was going to pull and what she was going to do.
Interesting.
And, I didn't say anything because I was being polite, but, I'm young and I just want to hear what she has to say. So I want to be the next American Idol at that point. I'm a singer. So that's all I'm interested in hearing about. And, some cute guy that I'm going to marry, right? So That's all I want to know. Except she goes into this thing, I read with her for about 6 years before she died. And she went into telling me, she said, "Look, you will You will always sing. You will sing all your life, but you will not be famous for that. And I said, what are you talking about? I've spent every dime, every hour rehearsing. Every job I've ever had is a singing job. That's what I went to college for, the whole thing. So I worked in a recording studio for 4 years. I mean, I was ready for a recording contract. That's why I moved out here to California. So she's telling me no. She said, you're going to do what I do, except everyone in the world will know who you are. And I said, what are you talking about? And I was doing it. I was reading for people in college, sort of for extra money,
Right.
and I actually liked doing it. So I started reading regular playing cards like she did because I was comfortable with that. And people would line up around my dorm and on Friday, Saturday night. And I mean, it just wouldn't stop. They just kept coming to my door. I said, guys, I have to study or I have to go to sleep now.
Right.
And they would pay me $10 for a 20-minute reading or something. It was nothing. So I did this during college, thinking it was a part-time thing, but I loved to do it. So I thought, I might as well keep doing it and practice. So I just remembered everybody was like amazed when they were walking out, and I'm thinking, all right, well, I guess I can do that too. So she told me, she said, you'd be doing this. She told me the exact year of my life this would happen.
Wow. That kind of scare you? Did that kind of scare you a little bit back then? Or?
No, I was waiting. I was like, okay. So she said the exact year. She said, you're either going to move to California or to Florida because I see palm trees. And then she said, you're going to have a very dangerous first relationship with someone when you go there, with someone from another country. And it was a Colombian, and I almost died through that whole experience. These are people I will deny knowing for the rest of my life. But she said all this would happen, and she said the year of my life it would happen, which, of course, we're not going to speak of because we speak not of these things. But she, I got my first series that year with MTV Sphere. 1 month after that year I turned. 1 month.
Wow.
And here's the weird thing. I started buying all these clothes, these winter coats and all these boots and all this stuff. And I was hosting a radio show myself for a number of years. It was a national radio show broadcasting to 26 million listeners, right? And I did it twice a weekend. And that's all I did. That, and I went to the store and I went on my bike rides, and it was pretty much that, and that was it. All of my friends saw me buying $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 worth of clothes, winter coats. I mean, I was buying 10 winter coats and all these boots and all this stuff. And they said, what are you doing? And they almost staged an intervention. They said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm going to need this. And they said, for what? You don't go anywhere. And, all I do is work.
Right.
And they said, you don't go anywhere. And I said, I don't know why. I just know I have to have this stuff. Well, I went in to interview with the producer from MTV Sphere. I started talking to him. I said, you're an Aries, aren't you? And he said, yeah, April 6th. And I said, okay. So he went on to do great things. His name is Chris Abrego. And he went on to do Who Done It on ABC and all these other shows on VH1. And, he went on to a big career. So, he's one of the well-known reality producers. And, they were carving a niche for themselves in paranormal reality, which had never been seen before.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was talking to him, and after I sort of had to pay my dues at that point. So I had to read everybody like about 12,000 times sitting at a table.
Right. Right.
And then the producers at Bandera Entertainment, they totally used me. They used me for free ratings for 3 weeks. And then finally they said, okay, get packed. You're going to be traveling for about 2 years, and I would only be home for 1 week out of every month. And we traveled all over the world. And I needed those clothes. So, it was just sort of weird. I had no idea why I was buying all this stuff. I just did. I just knew I had to.
Something told you.
Well, if I do stuff like that, there's generally a reason, and I can't explain it right at that moment. But I've learned not to ignore those impulses, because when I do, then I'm in trouble and I have to do everything last minute. The only thing I didn't buy was luggage, and that was a one-stop shop and, for 2 hours at a luggage store. And that was the only thing I didn't buy.
So you went.
But
So
I
do you,
was
so
ready.
do you tend to go with your gut feel on pretty much everything nowadays?
Well, I have to.
Yeah.
Because when I called the producer, Chris Abrego at MTV Sphere, I called him.
Mm-hmm.
But it was because an introduction was made with actually the New York office, and then they said to call him. But I knew I was supposed to be on that show. That's why I called him. I said, "Have you ever thought of using a psychic on this show for these kids that are going into these situations?" I said, "They need someone to prep them. They need someone to debrief them, because they're going to have nightmares for the rest of their lives." I mean, you're not helping them. You're not preparing them. They're not learning anything. They're just being scared to death. And I said, you should change the name of the show. I said, I did the numerology on it, and they were just calling it Fear at that point. I said, you should actually include the name MTV in it, MTV Sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "You're freaking me out right now," because he said, 20 minutes ago I got a call from the network. They're changing the name of the show to MTV Sphere. He said, "Can you come in tomorrow at 12 noon and meet everybody?" I said, "Okay." That's how it all started.
Well, you put all the
That's how it
pieces.
all began.
You put the pieces of the puzzle together before they did.
Well, he just didn't believe that I knew that. And I said, for some reason, I did the numerology on it, and it's not going to be successful unless you change the name.
Right.
And they had just decided 20 minutes before I called that the name was officially changing to MTV Sphere. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
So, these are like little-known stories about me, but it's how it all started, and I just knew I was part of something that was pioneering. We were breaking new ground. We were going into situations that, who knew how it was going to work out?
Sure.
But I knew it was important, so I had to be there. And I had to monitor the tone of what I was doing, what I was contributing. So that's what was happening during that whole thing. And MTV Sphere, it was a good boot camp for me, because there was no way you could come out of that situation and be spoiled. It was, first of all, you had to sign a contract that said, number one, you couldn't tell anybody where you were. So there are blog stories about Eastern State Penitentiary on there when I landed there, and a certain story about phone calls at the hotel that nobody placed, and security coming up and the whole thing. So I encourage your listeners to go read that. Just put Eastern State Penitentiary into the search bar, and it'll come up. But I'm telling you, some stuff happened that I cannot explain, and I brought this entity back to the hotel room.
So that was while you were filming over there? While they were filming? Yeah, okay.
Yep. I was in Philadelphia. It was snowing. It was cold as hell, and I was supposed to film the next day, but for some unknown reason, they decided to piss me off and have me film after flying for 6 hours.
Okay.
So I was tired. I had jet lag. I was exhausted, but I had to do all my documentary stuff that night for some reason.
Right.
So as soon as I get to Eastern State Penitentiary, I'm almost accosted by the camera guy that was working with us. He's a big guy, like 6'2", 6'3", and he was shaking. I just remembered he was shaking and tearing up, and he said, "Carla, I have to you? He said, I was in there last night shooting B-roll, and he said, I am not lying to you, and I have it on camera. I have all the footage because I kept rolling, but I was kicked down the stairs.
Really?
And there were huge marks on his back from where he was pushed. He said, something threw me down the stairs. And, you know, he's a good camera guy, so he kept rolling.
Sure.
That's what you do. Like, you have to. So I'm like, what? And he showed me the footage. He showed me the raw footage before it got edited. And he said, I'm thinking about quitting because I can't have that happen. I almost lost my life last night. I almost broke my neck falling down these stairs. And they were icy stairs. I mean, it was in the middle of winter. It was freezing cold, and all the stairs had ice on them. And so he didn't know what to do. He was going to quit, like all the rest of the cast members were going to quit at some point or another. And
did this guy? This guy, just real quick. So some of these people that you worked with doing this program, were some of them kind of like, I don't know, non-believer types in the paranormal, or figured, well, we're just here to do our job. Let's film and go home, and then experience some things and change their life forever?
Well, I think what happened was, you know, you got to remember this was the first show of its kind.
Right.
You know, MTV Sphere hadn't been attempted before. Paranormal reality was born on that series. So, you know, we were in new territory. We didn't know what to do. We just knew that it was exciting and we had to be a part of it. But, you know, everybody, all the crew members that were there, I mean, I just remember, you know, the cast was there. I remember being on the USS Hornet, and, you know, I was watching the cast from a remote camera because they were monitoring them in case one of them got into trouble or somebody fell or something happened. And they were all talking about dating me. I'm like, oh, come on. This is paranormal. You know, they were all talking about how they were going to get me to spend all night with them. It was just like, it was, you know, and then all the producers were like, oh, my God, they're all in love with you, Carla, you know. And so that was happening because we didn't know what was happening with paranormal reality yet.
Right.
But when they got scared and stuff started happening for real, you know, MTV Sphere was accused of, you know, setting up a lot of those stunts and, you know, faking it all,
Right.
or some of it, at least, to get, you know,
get some ratings, get some excitement.
Well, they had set up circumstances where something was bound to happen, you know, and they had EMT units on standby because they had to in case somebody had a heart attack or something happened. But most of the time it was the cast scaring themselves. And some of them have never recovered. Some went into therapy for years, I've heard, and they have never recovered from the experience. Because, yeah, I mean, yes, I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's ghost hunters. I don't care if it's haunting evidence. I don't care what it is. The producers are always going to produce the best show.
Sure.
It's never going to be raw TV. It's never going to be without some sort of editing feature, you know? I mean, it has to be for television, but there was an element of the unknown, like you didn't know what was going to happen, you know? And that's where all the good stuff came. Because, you know, they were sent on these dares and all this, you know, all these things were happening, but they had to spend all night in a truly haunted place. That was one good thing about the researchers on that show, on Fear.
Mm-hmm. They
brought people in to research the hell out of it before we even got there. And it wasn't just the same old. Like, we would go into areas that no one had been in, that no human eyes had seen for a while.
So they dug into the deep, the nitty-gritty places.
Yeah, I mean, it was nooks and crannies that nobody had ever seen. So that's what I liked about it, because you never knew what was going to happen, especially if you stick somebody in a cell or something like that with the known history of what happened, and then you put them by themselves, and they have to spend all night there in the dark.
Right.
And record their experiences. I mean, nobody had ever done that before. This is long before ghost hunters and all that. I mean, I met Jason and Grant when I was at a convention at Penn State with Ryan Buell. I actually did my first case with Ryan Buell from Paranormal State.
I've had him on the program.
My very first big case was Cindy Song, and he's the one that invited me to work on it with that police department. He's the one that contacted them at Ferguson Township. That's how that all happened.
A pretty exciting start, if you will. I mean, a pretty eventful start.
Well, what was weird was we all knew we were all going to have our own shows. I mean, we weren't we weren't just all fluffed up about it. We just sort of had this knowing that all of us that met each other, when I met Jason and Grant, they had just started Ghost Hunters. And Jason was telling me, at the table, we were having dinner, and he was telling me his marketing plan and about how he almost didn't sign with Sci-Fi because, he said, look, we're going to own the licensing on everything Ghost Hunters. And Sci-Fi wasn't hearing any of that. They're kind of tough over there. I've met with them a number of times. But, they weren't going to do it, but he wasn't going to relinquish the show idea until they had the licensing. Smart guy.
Yeah.
Made a fortune on that. Because the network wanted all that stuff.
Sure.
And these were people who were thinking ahead. I mean, Ryan Buell had an idea in his head. I remember when I first met with him, and I was filming, I actually filmed for ABC Primetime there too, and he came to my hotel room. I had no makeup on. I'm like, Ryan, I have to wake up tomorrow. There is no makeup going on right now. He said, okay. He said, I'd rather talk to you like that anyway. And I said, good. So we just sat and we just talked about this whole world of the paranormal and how it could be,
Mm-hmm.
And then, he had his own karmic lessons with all the other crap that happened with, his show and, the subsequent events that they were scheduling and all that and all, his health issues. But, that was his karma. That's where he had to go with that. So, everybody has their own path they have to take. So it's not like we were all part of that and knew he was going to, that was all going to happen.
Right.
But, I think what happened was he got swallowed up in it, and everybody else was running the show.
Right.
Because he was very self-deprecating. He was very much behind the scenes. He was more of a writer, So he wasn't the type of person to purposely set out to, but he let everyone else who didn't know what to do as far as running a business handle all these events. I think that's what happened.
Yeah.
So, everybody's got karma in their own different ways with these things. But, these are the real stories of what's happening behind the scenes. I mean, paranormal TV is not quite what you see on TV, but...
All right, everybody, welcome back to Fringe Radio. Our guest tonight for the first half of the show is famous TV psychic medium, Carla Barron. Again, Carla, thank you so much for taking time out of your weekend to be with us for a little bit.
Not a problem. Good to be here. So I just keep talking about 10,000 things because I have Moon in Gemini. But so does anybody have any questions that they want to ask?
Well, one thing I've got for you, I've got a whole bunch of them for you. And I'd like to talk about some other subjects in the second hour. But, TV reality, the TV reality show, you were kind of you were the start of it, of a lot of the paranormal stuff, kind of bringing that out to mainstream, the mainstream public. And, there's been so many different programs that have sprouted from that. I mean, there's many. Ghost Adventures has been going long and strong for such a long time. Do you think in general that it educated the public to be more open-minded watching these programs? Do you think that it helped the cause?
In the beginning, it did because it was there still was a mystery about the unknown,
Right.
and that sense of urgency to find out the truth, like the X-Files, it was like that need to know, and you couldn't go to sleep until you knew. And then you've got your hardcore ghost hunters who buy thousands and thousands of dollars worth of equipment. They sit out there doing EVPs for like all night long with, no reward, and they're just doing it for the love of the craft. That's great. But when it starts getting into a place where there's a lot of, how can I put this? It's gotten into like some of the Kardashian,
Right.
dramatic, let's see if we can taunt spirit, as much as possible. And first of all, if I've crossed over, the last thing I want happening is somebody yelling stuff at me.
Right.
Or like threatening me or taunting me to do this and that. I'll do it in my own good time. Thanks. I've crossed over. I've got more power over this, And, I think that's what's not understood. I think if you go in with, a modicum of research, and you've gone on your own quest, and then you have questions that still remain unanswered, then you're in the right place. But if you just go in thinking this is going to be your 15 minutes, when I was on Haunting Evidence and I did the pilot to Psychic Detectives, what was happening was I would wake up every time an episode aired to between 400 and 450 emails every morning.
Wow.
The day after showtime. These would be long letters. Some of them wanted readings and to go into a certain situation. Others wanted to do what I do or know how to get started with police departments and this and that, or how to develop their skills. And the thing is that this takes a certain type of personality to work with crime scenes and police and missing persons. You can't just go in there half-cocked and Mach 2 hair on fire. You can't just do that.
Right. It's not a hobby. It's a way of life.
You have to be normal as you go in. You just happen to have this extraordinary skill to be able to peer in, and be detailed about it, and to proffer, details and the next step to further the case along instead of wild goose chases and that type of thing. You don't know it's going to be a wild goose chase until they're on it. But, the thing is who you disseminate the information to, too. You can't just tell every cop who says, okay, I'll listen to what you have to say. You have to tell someone who actually is sensitive to this type of information.
Right.
And you have to know that before you have to start speaking to them. You have to sort of get a sense that they're going to appreciate what you're saying and they're going to get it. Like, they get it. They know what to do with what you're telling them.
Right.
They know how to throw a wide net over what you're saying so that they cover every base. And then it helps.
Well, and
people just assumed,
And one thing, Carla, and this is actually where I kind of started following you way back when I was, watching some of these programs, and I believe it was you that had made the statement about it, that it's a pretty, in today's society, of course, people are being more and more open about things. I find that every interview, every person I meet, it's people are being more open-minded. But when you've got you've got law enforcement, federal government, FBI, whatever, when they've exhausted all of their leads, all of their all the things that they can do, and now they're turning to somebody like you, they're taking a huge step, and in a good way. I mean that. They're taking a big step to say, look, we've done everything we can. We need to take it to the next level because we need some help and we need some insight.
And you would think that was, it sort of started off with that tone, but, they're human beings too, so
Sure.
they kind of like being on TV for 5 minutes. Every law enforcement person I met on every one of those episodes liked being on TV for a minute. They liked it. They wouldn't like to do it for the entirety of their lifetimes, but they liked it for when that was their big story that they were going to tell in bars and at parties. You know,
Right.
I mean, that was part of this, and we knew that. But they have the types of personalities where they said, "What if? What if she says something, and that could be the next step?" And they were lost. They didn't know what to do, so they thought, what the hell, let's try it.
Sure.
And they didn't know that they were going to take so much flack later on for doing so. I mean, we did too. As a show, I mean, they came after us, why don't you solve the case every hour? First of all, that's not how it happened.
Right.
Let me explain why every missing person wasn't found or every murder wasn't solved on every episode of Haunting Evidence until later. Number one, cases aren't solved until all the karmic elements come into play. They all have to present the way that it was arranged prior to coming into the lifetime. It's called group karma. And, nowadays, it's not just the psychic. It's not just law enforcement. It's not just the perpetrator doing something stupid. It's first of all, the victim signs on for a tremendous contribution to the Akashic records. They come in and they are willing to sacrifice, for the good of the universe. I mean, that's basically what happened. And so that we learn that no other child will ever have to go through that again.
Right.
So they subconsciously, as a soul, knew that before coming in. It's not just random victims who were chosen. From my angle, from how I because I can see so deeply into what's going on, that's how it is. So there's another otherworldly part of this where their souls are fully aware on the other side of what's happening. Their higher selves know that something dire like this is about to happen, but they have signed on for this, and unfortunately, terrible, terrible, heinous crimes have happened, and the worst of humanity has been portrayed. But we're here to uncover all that. No one will get away with this crap anymore. That's how I see it. And we come in, and it's like, okay, you better do something new, because the same old isn't working, because we've got crime forms who are on those cases within the first hour of someone missing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's barely an Amber Alert out before they've all decided, okay, let's get on this. I'm just so proud of everybody of how they come in. It's the media who come in, and they turn it into a circus sometimes, but you know what? But they get it out there. They're part of the solution too. And the psychics who come in, the ones who are real. You're going to get the ones who come in that are a little more of the circus variety, the gypsy fortune tellers who, somehow want to become famous for all this. I mean, I didn't want to become famous for being a psychic. It just sort of happened.
Well, it's your life path.
I had a whole other career worked out. I was going to be a famous American Idol, so it's not like I set out to do that, but right. I can't imagine doing anything else with my life ever. It's hard. It's hard because there's a lot of sacrifice with your own personal life. A lot of your hours aren't your own, but there's so much that's happening that I can't imagine not being part of it,
Well, yeah, and it's like it's a calling. Well, from when you were a young girl, I mean, it was something that was meant to be. It was the life.
Well, it was certainly it was certainly meant to be, since my parents really weren't too hip to be square on me doing this. I mean, my mother had, she was reading all these horror books, and she read The Exorcist, and all of a sudden she decided she was going to burn all my stuff. And and she's a Sagittarian, so she was the worst liar in the world. But she said, Carla, bring me your tarot cards and your astrology stuff. And I said, why? Like, I knew she was up to something because she was such a bad liar. And I had a Ouija board, yes. And she said, bring me that too. And I just went, she threw it all in the fireplace.
Really?
This is, and you know what? I went and got it all myself and just hid it from everybody, and I studied on my own.
Yeah.
And I rebuilt my library of books, and I have some ancient manuscripts that are very valuable, ancient Chaldean Hebrew scripts and some ancient writings that, I've been able to locate and procure along the way. And, I'm just, I did it on my own. I just didn't tell anyone.
Do you think
My dad was a doctor, anesthesiologist, so he didn't understand any of it. And he would always say to my mother, oh, it's your fault because you introduced her to that psychic Mary. He was always blaming her.
Let me ask you just real quick. Did it scare your mom, you think?
No, because she wanted to be me. I mean, in the end, a lot of times when these things happen, it's because, there's a little bit of envy there because, she had kids and she was a surgical nurse. She met my father and then they got married and she had kids. That was the life she chose. But she secretly always wanted to do all this, not as a psychic, but just to be an actress or something, or I don't know. And I think she saw me doing it, and none of my family were ever really there. So to this day, my dad died, and he told me before he died, he said, look, I see the effect you're having on people and how you're healing them and helping. And every time he'd go into the operating room, the nurses would say, oh, my God, we saw your daughter on TV last night. Oh, my God, it was so good. And my dad would just be, he said, well, you look like you're helping people, so maybe I was wrong. He said, I just don't understand what it is you do. Because he was hardcore Catholic. He didn't know anything about this.
Well, and the type of job he had, I mean, he controlled people's lives. He could save them or take them.
Exactly. So, he didn't know if I was making it up or what I was doing, but then he saw that I was actually doing this, that I was actually seeing. I just never read from my family, and I don't read for family and friends. It's a blanket rule. It just doesn't happen. Yeah. For different reasons, but they take advantage, like all families do. Come on. I mean, you give something to a family member, even if you're a doctor, you give them medical advice, they want more and more and more. They don't know when to stop.
Yeah, that's true. It's entitlement issues.
Well, yeah, because they're family.
Sure.
So I just made a rule. No one ever. So it ended up being a quest for myself. And I just knew I had to do this. And, when it happened, I think my family was in disbelief,
Right.
And I think my brothers tried to sell the remainder of my stuff in the attic because I was famous at that point. They were like, I had heard stories about how they were going to sell my stuff. Well, at least I took everything that I wanted when I left. I knew that everything that I took was what it had to be. So it's how I learned. And all of you guys have become my family. Mm-hmm. Everyone I read, all my fans. I mean, they know how much they mean to me. They've lived all my life experiences with me, all my lessons that I'm learning, all the really hard ones, all the really good ones too. So I mean, they've been there. They've been waiting for my next show, and that's something I'm in talks with now. So hopefully this latest producer is the one that I've been waiting for. I sort of told him, I said, I think you're the one I've been waiting for. And, so we've been talking. You never know until it happens.
Right. I agree.
The deal is signed and the pilot is shot and the network says, okay, green light. But he and I are on the same page, and he's got a number of projects, plus he's very versed in paranormal reality. So he's got a project coming out November 1st called The Demon Files. So, and he just seems to speak my language. We both want to do something real. We don't want nonsense out there. If we're going to do something, it's not worth getting up in the morning to shoot something unless it's going to be something of value, of intrinsic value somehow, that we're going to take it to the next level. We're going to find out about the unknown.
Right.
We're going to take the veil down,